Okay, welcome to our second web-based lecture for the semester. We're actually going to do things a little bit out of order. So instead of starting our discussion on the 8 limbs with limb 1, we're actually going to start our discussion on the 8 limbs with limb 3. So we're going to be talking about asana, or those postures, today. Do a really quick review. We're going to talk about why we do the asanas. I mentioned it briefly in the last online lecture, but we'll get a little bit more into the nitty-gritty for that. We're also going to talk about the categories of asana, beyond just downward facing dog or half moon. There are actually different categories that I want you guys to be familiar with and hopefully thinking about as we're going through these in class. And then we're going to talk about sensing stability and how to use our feet and our core effectively. These are things that will be really important for all of the different asanas, but I want to sort of cover that and give you guys a few exercises that are really quick and easy that you can pretty much do anytime. If you've got 30 seconds, you're sitting at a stoplight or whatever. And then obviously ending the lecture with your last homework. So this was in that first lecture. But just for a review, this is the pyramid representation of the 8 limbs of yoga. Remember, your yamas and niyamas are at the bottom, and then your pranayama and asana, the physical path, that green bar in the middle, and then your 4 higher order thinking levels. So again, this week we're really focusing on that physical path. Today, this particular lecture will be on asana. The second one that you'll have for this week will be on pranayama, breath control. So why do we do asana? Why is asana so important? Asana are physical postures that are designed to strengthen or rejuvenate the body in some way. In Raja or Ashtanga yoga, remember that yoga that is integrating all 8 limbs, the purpose of the posture is to prepare the self for the increased amount of mental, emotional, and spiritual energy brought on by those higher order thinking limbs. So the idea is you are expending the energy that's in your body or held in your body so that you are actually able to quiet the physical self and listen to the mental and spiritual aspect of yourself. So this is really important, especially when we talk about releasing physical blockages. Tight hips are the really common one. I'll probably talk about that off and on. Because we are a culture and a society that sits a lot, we've tended to lose a lot of flexibility in our hips. So there will be certain postures that many of you might find difficult. Cobbler's pose, for example, that really stretches that area of the body a lot. But again, we do that for a very particular reason. The other thing, the benefit that we get from asana is to release mental blockages, again, before we attempt those higher order thinking levels. Don't forget, yoga is non-competitive. It's non-competitive with your neighbor. It's non-competitive with yourself. It doesn't matter, what your neighbor is able to do or not do. And again, remember that our own abilities and our own strengths and weaknesses may change and may fluctuate a little bit day to day. So again, we're trying to cultivate that sensory awareness. Can we actually feel and sense what's going on in our bodies? Are we attuned to that? Because if we can be attuned to that, then gaining that awareness when we're thinking about our mental standpoint will actually become easier. So categories of asana. There are 8 different categories. They're pretty simple and straightforward. Most of them are actually, or most of the asana, I should say, are categorized based on your spine position. So the first category are standing poses. In a standing pose, your spine is going to remain in an unbroken stack above your base of support. Typically in a standing pose, our base of support are our feet, because we're standing. These poses will enhance strength, flexibility, and alignment. And these poses, while some of them may seem really simple, are actually engaging and calling on many muscle groups, especially tiny muscle groups, at one time. So these are dynamic poses. The 2 pictures, the picture at the top is mountain pose, which is a super common one. Generally speaking, that's how 90% of any postures that are supported by your feet will start. The picture on the bottom is eagle pose. Second category are forward folds. A forward fold is a pose in which your spine curves forward, which allows the torso to fold over the legs. A forward fold is going to stretch the backside of your body, so your back, your lower back, and your hamstrings on the backside of your legs. It's also going to tone your internal organs, stomach, pancreas, all that good stuff. Forward folds are generally calming poses, so a lot of times you'll see these in place after poses that are more challenging to allow pranayama to return back to normal and to calm the body down a little bit. So the two pictures, the top picture is standing forward fold. The bottom is child's pose. And you'll probably see child's pose a lot. It's a very common pose of relaxation. Third category of asana is exactly the opposite of a forward fold. It's a back bend. In a back bend, your spine arches backwards. So a back bend, because it's the opposite of a forward fold, you would expect that it is stretching and strengthening exactly the opposite way. So these particular asanas stretch the front side of the body and strengthen your back muscles. These are critically important poses because they facilitate breath, because you're actually opening up the front side of your body, especially in your torso. It actually allows your lungs to expand and breathe much easier. So because of that, these are usually energizing poses. These are poses that when you come out of them, you should actually feel very invigorated. So again, our two pictures, our two examples on this slide, the top is camel pose, which is a very simple and very easily modifiable back bend. This is one that we'll do and we'll see a lot. Excuse me, the bottom picture is bow pose. I want you guys to experience this because bow pose is difficult, but it's not impossible for most people. And bow pose really allows for a lot of sort of unique sensations in your body. So hopefully we'll get to that one. Fourth category, side bending poses. In side bending poses, the spine bends laterally, so meaning to the left or to the right at the level of the hips. So that's really important, that the spine isn't actually bending up by your shoulders or in the middle of your back, that you're actually bending at your hips. So side bending poses are going to stretch the muscle on the opposite side of the bend and strengthen muscles on the same side of the bend. So in other words, if you are bending towards your right side will be strengthened, your left side will be stretched. Side bending poses help create and enhance good posture, and because they are doing a lot of strengthening, it's also firming poses. And our picture examples, the top is triangle pose and the bottom is half moon. Fifth category are twisting poses. A twisting pose is any pose in which the spine actually rotates left or right. So again, here we're not necessarily bending. If you take a look at both pictures, the spine actually stays straight from the shoulders all the way to the hips. What's different is that the hips and the shoulders aren't squared with each other. So that's the difference between a twisting pose and a side bending pose. Twisting poses are tension relievers, especially in your deep back muscles. I'm sure most of you guys have experienced sitting through a really long lecture, and the first thing that you do when you start to fidget is twist around at your lower back. And that's really the basis of this asana, is it's meant to relieve that tension that's back there. So it also helps promote proper spine alignment. These are commonly considered to be refreshing poses. At the top is the revolved abdominal twist, and the bottom is the seated twist. Sixth category of asana are inversions. An inversion is any pose where the head is lower than the heart. It's important to note that here, spinal alignment plays less of a role than in terms of, again, how your heart is in line with your head. So an inversion can also be twisted. It could also be a side bending posture, etc. The most important thing that screams this is an inversion pose is that your head is lower than your heart. These poses will actually help reverse blood flow in the body. Typically, gravity kind of runs that, so your blood wants to flow from your heart to your feet. So these are poses where you're getting blood flow from your heart up to your head. This is really beneficial for the hormone system in our body. And usually these poses are supported by your arms, at least partially. So these are really great poses to help strengthen your upper body. Our two pictures, the top picture is downward facing dog, which is actually a fairly challenging pose, but one that we should get to without any problem. And then the bottom picture is easy inversion, which is a very simple inversion and is relatively safe for most people. Seventh category of asana is seated posture. Seated posture is basically just used to modify any of the other postures by allowing you to have a larger base of support or increased stability. I'm going to talk about that more in a second. So if that's confusing to you, just hang on. Seated poses are also used to enhance hip opening postures. I mentioned at the beginning, a lot of us are probably going to be fighting tight hips, which is a very common block. So we'll be doing some seated poses because it really does allow us to stretch our hips quite efficiently. So the top picture is seated forward fold. And if you think back to a couple of slides ago when I showed you the standing forward fold, you'll notice that is the exact same posture. Your physical body is in the exact same position with your torso folded over your legs and your hands reaching down towards your feet. One of the postures, your base of support happens to be your feet. In this particular posture, your base of support is your bottom and the backside of your legs. So again, if that idea of base of support is confusing you, keep that in the back of your mind for a couple of slides from now. And then the bottom picture is cobbler. It's also commonly called the bound angle pose. And this is a really great hip opening posture. And then the last category of asana is broadly called resting postures. Basically, it just means that you are either prone, so you're laying on your tummy, or you're supine, you're laying on your back. It's important to note that even though you have a really large base of support, it's basically half your entire body, you should still maintain muscle control. Okay, so in other words, your body is still being held consciously by you in a particular posture. You're not just sort of laying on the floor hither-tither. So these are the two postures that I'm going to allow you guys to use for final relaxation. The really, really common one is the top pose, corpse pose, or shavasana. That's one of the other few Sanskrit words I'm going to ask you guys to know. And then if you guys want an option or a modification or just to see if something works differently for you, the bottom pose is crocodile. So again, either one of these poses is good with me for final relaxation. What I'd recommend is try them both and see if you like one better than the other. Okay, so now that we know the different categories of asana, the different ways in which our body can bend and move, what I want to take a look at now is how do we sense our stability? How do we sense how stable we actually are in our environment and given a certain asana? So the first aspect of that is your orientation or your base of support. And that's simply how much of your body is in contact with the ground. Okay? More of you is in contact with the ground. That means that you have a larger base of support. It means you are more stable. So again, think back to the two examples of the forward fold that I showed you. In standing forward fold, it's just your feet that are in contact with the ground. So you are less stable in that posture than you are if you were in seated forward fold, where you are sitting down and again, your bottom and the back of your legs are providing your base of support. Dimensionality, that refers to the relationship of your different body segments and parts, arms, legs, torsos, etc. how they relate to each other in space. So you can have really compact postures, mountain posture, for example. You're standing, but your arms and legs are both in. There's nothing sort of flailing around that you have to control. So that's a more stable posture versus something where your arms and legs are widely dispersed. So something like half moon posture, for example, where you're supported on essentially the fingertips of one hand and one foot. You've got one leg stretched out to the side and one hand way up in the air. You're much less stable in that posture because your body is very dispersed. And then the third factor in sensing stability is your sensory input. So what kind of feedback are you getting from your body? What kind of feedback are you getting from your muscles and joints? Are things shaking and wobbling? We've all been in an asana where we felt that. Or are you fairly stable? Okay, do you feel like your muscles and your joints are strong? And then a really important feedback system is feedback from your vision. Okay, where your gaze is in any particular asana can actually make you more or less stable. So some of my cues, particularly in the more difficult postures this term, will actually be where to put your eyes. Okay, most of our postures are going to be supported by our feet and our core. So we're going to talk about how to use those two areas of our body effectively. So with your feet, what I want you to do is imagine that there's a triangle drawn on the bottom of your foot, just like the picture right here. One point of the triangle is at the large bony process on the back of your heel. One is at the ball of your big toe, and one is at the ball of your pinky toe. The idea is anytime your feet are supporting you, you want your body weight to be distributed evenly among those 3 points. If you're doing that correctly, your knee should be approximately in line with your second toe. Depending on your own anatomy, it might be a little bit different, so that's why I said approximately, but that's kind of your double check. Here's a method that you can do to practice this, basically anytime that you're seated. What I want you to do is essentially place one foot down, heel first, so that your heel is firm and in contact solidly with the ground. As soon as you feel that, what I want you to do is stretch out your toes as wide as you can and roll your foot forward until the balls of your feet are also in contact with the ground firmly. And then at that point, go ahead and relax your toes down. When you're doing that, again, think about how your foot feels when it's in contact with the ground like that. Okay. And then again, your other supporting factor in your body is going to be your core muscles. When I say core, I don't just mean your abdominal muscles. I mean your abdominal muscles. I mean your obliques. I mean the little teeny tiny fibers that run in between each of your ribs on your rib cage. And I mean your back and particularly your lower back muscles. So these are largely the muscles that wrap all the way around your midsection. Using your core muscles effectively, it's all about keeping your spinal curve intact. For any of you guys who have had Bio 129 or Bio 141, who have taken the anatomy and physiology, you know that your spine is not perfectly straight. Your spine actually has 3 curves built into it. It curves in towards your throat, up at your neck. It will curve out as your ribs meet in the middle of your body, and then it will curve back in right before your spine attaches to your pelvis. So at your lower back, there's usually a little space where you can put your hand that's a little concave right there. So using your core muscles is actually about keeping the natural curve of your spine intact because that's where your spine is strongest. So you can actually practice this 2 different ways, okay? If you're seated or standing, okay, so if you're in either one of those asanas, what I want you to do is picture a string running from your tailbone upwards through your back, up through your neck, up through the very tippy top of your head, okay? And what I want you to do is imagine that the string pulls up on your head and neck as it exits your skull. Okay? The other sort of visual that I can give for you guys for this would be when you guys go to the doctor for like a yearly checkup and they take your height, everybody tries to make themselves like a ½ inch taller by stretching the crown of their head a little bit. That's essentially the same sort of thing that you should feel if you're doing the string imagery. Okay? If you are in a twisted forward fold or a supine, so an on your back sort of posture, what I want you to do is picture that there is a hook right behind your belly button, okay, inside your tummy, and that hook is pulling your navel backwards towards your spine, okay? In both cases, regardless of which posture you're in, regardless of what imagery you're using, you should feel your hips rotate backwards slightly, your shoulder blades should relax down, and your chin should come a little bit forward and down. If you feel those three things happening, that means that your core is being used to maintain spinal curves, and that's where we want to be. Which brings us to your second homework. I want you guys to practice these ideas of stability in tree pose. So I've given you the visual representation of tree pose right here. And this is what I want you to do. I want you to for each one of these three exercises, note how stable your body feels and why. So pay attention to your orientation, your base of support. What kind of input are you getting from your senses? How do your feet feel? How do your core feel? Okay? And I want you to submit a short little essay, about a page long is plenty, about what your experience is here. So first exercise, lie down on your back with your core engaged. Slowly bring one foot up to your inner thigh into mimicking the posture that's pictured right here. Okay? I want you to hold it for several breaths, and again, make note, how stable do you feel and why? Second exercise, you're going to pretty much exactly mimic the picture on the right. Stand with your feet square, core aligned and engaged. When you're ready, bring one foot up to your inner thigh, hold it for several breaths. Again, note how stable and secure you feel and why. Third exercise, stay in that standing posture, but close your eyes. Same thing, hold it for several breaths and note how stable and secure you feel. Okay? Don't forget, you guys have one more lecture, web-based for this week. It's up, it's posted, it's ready to go. So don't forget to watch that one, and I will see you guys in class.